On December 7th, 2025, something shocking happened in Benin. Soldiers stormed the national TV station. They forced journalists at gunpoint to broadcast their message. A lieutenant colonel appeared on screen and announced that the president had been overthrown. For a few hours, it looked like Benin, one of West Africa's most stable democracies, had just fallen to a military coup. But then, the government fought back, and the coup failed. So what actually happened? How did soldiers get so close to overthrowing the government? Why did the coup fail? And what does this tell us about the state of democracy in West Africa? This is the full story of Benin's failed coup. Here's how it went down. In the early hours of December 7th, before most people in Cotonou were awake, gunfire erupted across the city. People near the port heard explosions. Helicopters started circling overhead. Soldiers blocked the roads leading to President Patrice Talon's residence. At the same time, another group of soldiers showed up at the state television station. They took control of the building. Journalists inside were held hostage, forced to stay and help broadcast what came next. Around 9 a.m., 8 soldiers appeared on live television. Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigri was their spokesman. He looked straight into the camera and made an announcement. President Patrice Talon was no longer in power. The constitution was suspended. All political parties were banned. All borders were closed. Land, sea, and air. He said they were forming a new military government called the Military Committee for Refoundation. And he listed their grievances. The government has failed to protect soldiers from jihadist attacks in the north. Fallen soldiers and their families have been abandoned. Healthcare is collapsing. Taxes keep rising. Democracy has become a sham. After the broadcast, the TV signal went dead. But the coup plotters made a critical mistake. They didn't control the actual levers of power. They had the TV station. But they didn't have the presidential palace. They didn't have the military command structure. And most importantly, they didn't have the loyalty of the majority of Benin's armed forces. Within hours, the government organized a response. Around 11 a.m., Benin's interior minister appeared on television with a very different message. He said the coup attempt had been stopped. The army had stayed loyal to President Talon. Only a small group of soldiers, he called them mutineers, had tried to take over. They were being hunted down. By the end of the day, 14 people were under arrest, including 12 active duty soldiers. The TV station was back under government control. And President Talon, though he still hasn't appeared publicly, was confirmed to be safe, reportedly at a secure location, possibly the French embassy. But there was one problem. Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigri, the man who led the coup attempt, escaped. As of Sunday night, he was still on the run. The government is hunting him, but he's out there somewhere. And as long as he's free, this story isn't quite over. So, why did the coup fail? 3 reasons. First, the plotters didn't have enough support within the military. Most of Benin's army stayed loyal to the president. Without that, you can't hold power. Second, they moved too slowly. They seized the TV station, but didn't immediately secure the presidential palace or neutralize the military command. That gave the government time to organize a response. Third, they underestimated the government's will to fight back. Benin's security forces acted quickly to isolate and arrest the plotters before they could consolidate control. In other words, this wasn't a well-planned coup. It was a reckless gamble. And it failed. So, who is Patrice Talon, and why did soldiers want to overthrow him? Patrice Talon is not your typical African politician. He didn't come from the military. He didn't inherit power. He's a businessman, a very rich businessman. Before he became president, he controlled a huge chunk of Benin's cotton industry. Cotton is one of Benin's biggest exports, and Talon owned the companies that ginned it, sold it, and shipped it overseas. People started calling him the King of Cotton. In 2016, he ran for president. He promised to run the country like a business, efficient, modern, no corruption. A lot of people believed him. He won. And at first, things looked good. Roads were paved, the port got upgraded, the economy grew. But then, slowly, Talon started tightening his grip. Opposition politicians started getting arrested, some on corruption charges, some on accusations of plotting coups. Key rivals were thrown in jail or forced to flee the country. In 2021, Talon ran for re-election. He won with 86% of the vote. Sounds impressive, right? Except the opposition boycotted the election because they said it was rigged. And here's where it gets even worse. Talon is supposed to step down in April 2026. Benin's constitution says presidents can only serve 2 terms. Talon has already served 2, so technically he should be gone in 4 months. But here's the problem. Last month, Benin's parliament changed the constitution. They extended presidential terms from 5 years to 7 years. They created a whole new Senate, and they made it nearly impossible for opposition candidates to run. The main opposition candidate for the 2026 election was just disqualified. The Election Commission said he didn't have enough sponsors, whatever that means. Meanwhile, Talon has already handpicked his successor, Romuald Wadagni, his finance minister. A lot of Beninese people think this is a setup. They think Talon will leave office in name only, but still pull the strings from behind the scenes. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook used by leaders all over Africa. Stay in power without technically staying in power. So by December 2025, a lot of people in Benin were angry. The opposition felt cheated. And clearly, some soldiers decided enough was enough. Now, if you're thinking, wow, a coup in Benin, that's shocking. Well, it shouldn't be. Because Benin has seen this movie before. Many times. In the 1960s and 70s, right after independence from France, Benin became the coup capital of West Africa. 1963, military coup. 1965, another one. 1967, another one. 1969, yep, another one. 1972, and one more for good measure. 5 coups in 9 years. That's almost 1 coup every 2 years. And in 1972, one of those coups brought a guy named Mathieu Carriacou to power. He was a military officer, and he decided he liked being president. So he stayed, for 19 years, as a dictator. It wasn't until 1991 that Benin finally transitioned to democracy. And for 30 years, Benin was held up as a success story. Look at Benin, people said. They figured it out. Peaceful elections, smooth transitions of power. Democracy works. But that success story is now in serious danger. And here's something really disturbing. This isn't even the first coup attempt against Patrice Talon. In January 2025, just 11 months ago, 2 of Talon's closest friends were sentenced to 20 years in prison for allegedly trying to overthrow him. One of them was Olivier Boko, a businessman and Talon's longtime buddy. The other was Oswald Homaki, a former government minister. According to prosecutors, they tried to bribe the head of the presidential guard to help them take over. They got caught. They went to prison. So coup plots have been bubbling under the surface in Benin for over a year. Today's attempt isn't some random explosion of violence. It's been building. So why did these soldiers risk their lives to try to overthrow the government? The reasons they gave on TV were real grievances. Northern Benin is under attack from jihadist groups spilling over from Niger and Burkina Faso. Soldiers are dying, and many in the military feel the government isn't doing enough to protect them or support their families. Healthcare has been cut, taxes have gone up, and politically, the opposition has been systematically crushed. Key candidates have been disqualified, opponents have been jailed. The upcoming 2026 election looks like a sham. These soldiers saw a government that was failing its people and clinging to power by force. So they decided to act. But here's the problem. Even if their grievances were legitimate, their solution, a military coup was never going to work. The regional response. The fact that this coup failed is good news. It means Benin's democratic institutions, however flawed, are still strong enough to survive. But the fact that it happened at all is deeply worrying, because Benin was supposed to be different. For 30 years, from 1991 to 2025, Benin was held up as a model of democracy in West Africa. Peaceful elections, smooth transitions of power, no coups. But now, Benin has joined a growing list of West African countries where soldiers have tried to seize power. Mali, 2020 and 2021. Guinea, 2021. Burkina Faso, 2022 and 2023. Niger, 2023. Gabon, 2023. Guinea-Bissau, November 2025. And now Benin, December 2025. That's 9 coups or coup attempts in West Africa in just 5 years. And here's how seriously the region is taking this. On Sunday, ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, ordered the immediate deployment of a standby military force to Benin. Troops from Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Sierra Leone are being sent to support the Beninese government. This is a massive show of force. ECOWAS is saying, we will not let another West African country fall to a military coup. The African Union also strongly condemned the coup attempt, calling it a grave violation of democratic principles. By Monday, Cotonou was relatively calm. Traffic resumed. Markets reopened. Life started returning to normal. But the coup leader, Pascal Tigri, is still out there, on the run. And as long as he's free, the threat isn't completely gone. So, even though this particular coup failed, the pattern is clear. Military takeovers are becoming normal in West Africa again. And regional powers are now scrambling to stop the spread. So here's what actually happened in Benin's failed coup. On December 7th, 2025, a small group of soldiers led by Lieutenant Colonel Pascal Tigri tried to overthrow President Patrice Talon. They seized the state TV station, attacked the presidential residence, and announced the creation of a military government. But the coup failed. Most of the army stayed loyal. The government responded quickly. Within hours, 14 people were arrested. President Talon is safe. The city is calm. Democracy survived. But the coup leader, Pascal Tigri, is still out there. And ECOWAS has had to deploy troops from 4 countries just to make sure this doesn't happen again. That tells you everything you need to know about how fragile democracy has become in West Africa, because Benin is now the 9th West African country to experience a military coup or coup attempt in just 5 years. And that raises a much bigger question. Why does West Africa keep having coups? That's what I'm going to answer in my next video, because if we don't understand why this keeps happening, we can't predict where it's going to happen next. If you want to understand what's really happening in West Africa, hit subscribe. This story is far from over. Thanks for watching.